Welcome in to the Autzen Audibles Podcast. Eric Scope is on the show. I'm Matt Preem. Welcome to we'll call it summer edition. School's not technically out yet here in Eugene, but we're about there. So we'll call it a summer edition of the podcast. And usually when that summertime hits, that means we dive into like preseason announcement type of information. And we just got some of that. Kickoff times and TV channel broadcast announcements were made for 6 of Oregon football's 12 regular season games for the 2025 football season. And we're going to break this down here for a second. It's first glance, Eric, it's a really good time slot for Oregon. You look at the first game of the year, August 30th, Montana State, home game, Big Ten Network, 1 p.m. game. It's not going to be a late night. Second game of the season, Oklahoma State. This one was a little bit of a surprise to me. 12:30 kickoff on CBS. Whole country will see that one. The following weekend, when Oregon hits the road for the first time, they travel to Northwestern, and this was maybe the biggest surprise. Big noon kickoff.
No kidding.
Fox selects it, 9 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. local time kick in Evanston, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. We've also got a whiteout performance. Penn State's already announced that for the 27th, Oregon at Penn State, 4:30 Pacific, 7:30 p.m. local time, NBC primetime broadcast. Rutgers game. Couple weeks later, October 18th, another primetime slot. Don't know the channel yet, but it's going to be a 3:30 or 4 p.m. game. Kind of feels like a Big Ten Network game, but we'll see. And then the last one is a date change, a kickoff time announced, and a channel broadcast announcement. November 14th, second to last home game of the year for Oregon. They'll play Minnesota. It's a Fox game. It's on 6 p.m. It's on a Friday now instead of a Saturday. I hate Friday games, but at least it's a home Friday game, so we get one extra day of a weekend for us. But hey, first run through it, a bunch of national time slots, broadcast channels, and most importantly, Oregon's going to be playing a ton of games either right in the middle of the day, which you want, or that prime time, 4 o'clock West Coast kickoff time.
Yeah, I think the big one for me, just looking at this, and was how was the Penn State game going to be, I guess, presented? And you can't ask for, I guess, just better attention in terms of 4:30 on NBC, one of the premier networks. And I think this sort of speaks to what we think this game's going to be, right? And this isn't a surprise, right? That Oregon's getting that game's getting a great, time slot on a great network, because this was this is the Big Ten championship rematch, and this is going to be played at a place that is very difficult to play. I think Oregon fans that are making the trip are going to have a blast, and it's probably going to be very memorable. Probably similar to some of these other venues that you've checked out in the Big Ten country the last couple of years, whether it be the Big House last year back in Columbus. What was that, 2022 under Mario? I feel like it's going to be that kind of an experience. So getting that, right in the kind of time of day, I think it's pretty likely both teams are undefeated. I was looking at this, like you've already run through, Matt, kind of what Oregon has before, but as a reminder, Montana State, Oklahoma State, Oregon State at home, Northwestern on the road. And then you look at Penn State, it's Nevada, FIU, Villanova, bye week Oregon. That sets up very nicely for the Nittany Lions, probably in terms of just preparing for this game, but also like Oregon's going to be a little bit more battle tested going in. But I think both those teams will be most likely undefeated, and most likely that's like a couple of top 5, top 8 teams, depending on how the rankings fall out from here. So that game in particular, Matt, feels just like that's as advertised. It's going to be in front of a lot of people.
Oh, that could be one of, if not the most viewed game outside of rivalry weekend or rivalry game matchups across college football. 4:30 kick on NBC. It's going to be the rematch of two teams, like you said. The whiteout factor will be cool. That's just going to be a massive game. And, you look at Oregon's schedule, you mentioned it. They will be battle tested for that one. Oklahoma State will be a good test. They have to go on the road, so that won't be the first road game like that.
Yeah, true.
And I think that matters. Obviously Northwestern's game day environment will not even come close to what Penn State's will for that one a couple weeks earlier. But you still get to go through the whole process of what it's like to play on the road. That Oregon State game will be chippy and fiery, I'm sure. Oregon should still dominate, but nonetheless, it's a rivalry game. It gets the juices flowing, and then you travel to that Penn State game. But that's going to be a big one. It's going to be an exciting one. But I just go back to like how I originally said it. Like, you look at these slots and you want visibility. You don't want to be staying up too late if you're having to drive to a home game. What was it, a couple years ago? Like, every single Oregon game felt like it was a 6 p.m. or later kickoff. And quite honestly, like, they have one so far. And sure, there could be some more that pop in there and land at the 4, 5, 6 o'clock local time starts. But overall, 1 o'clock for your season opener, 12:30 the next week, 9 a.m. Pacific time, on the road.
Matt, really quick, where do you land at 9 a.m.? 9 a.m., I know it's not 9 a.m. local, in Illinois for that game, but for Oregon fans, like what? I don't know if we're both making that trip. Like, I'm not sure how thrilled I am to be getting up that early to watch a game, but that's maybe just me being selfish.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like it. I would much rather play the noon game. It helps that I think it's like contractually built in that West Coast teams can't play local 9 a.m. games. So that will never happen for a home game at Autzen, which would be absolutely terrible. I mean, they played like Portland State or something a couple years ago at 11 a.m., and that felt really weird. I think if it was a really big game, much like Ohio State, I think Ohio State was a big noon kickoff, 9 a.m. start for
in 2022.
Yeah,
I think you're right. It was that definitely was that in Columbus.
But if it was Ohio State, I wouldn't like it nearly as much as I do now. Like, excuse me. Reason being,
I've been saying 2022. 2021 was Oregon Ohio State. My fault. That was Mario's last year. I'm sorry. Like,
no offense to Northwestern, but they shouldn't be very good. And this is kind of a game where I think the average fan is going to be kind of like, I'm going to be up. I'm going to be in front of my TV at 9 a.m. I may not have showered, but I may have had breakfast already, or I'm going to be making breakfast and watching it while the game's going on. But hopefully by the early part of the fourth quarter, it's 42-14, and I go about the rest of my day on a Saturday. Now, for you and I, that's different. Sure. But I think that's the kind of 9 a.m. game you want, where it's, I'm going to pay attention, but eventually at some point the game is going to be just a disaster. I'll watch the mop-up duty, the backups get playing time on DVR later that night before I go to bed or something. But if it was a big time game, I would not like it, because it's an event. You want to get up and you want to be with your buddies, or you want to go to the bar and pregame for a little bit and then watch the game, or you want to travel to the game. I mean, that's going to be weird too. But I think for a lower tier game, these are where, for Oregon, what you want, because if it gets out of hand, you can go about your day and you still got plenty of time to do other things.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on in terms of, like, if this was the Penn State designation or something like that, that would be, I'd have some real issues with that. Just the other note I wanted to share, or that kind of stood out to me, was Oregon getting an extra day in prep for USC after Minnesota because of the Friday. I don't know how much that's going to matter. I don't know how much people are concerned about USC, but like USC Washington to finish the regular season, Oregon could be in position to maybe be competing for a conference championship game appearance. Kind of sneaky, maybe important to get an extra day there coming off that Minnesota game, which is now on Friday the 14th as opposed to Saturday the 15th. So just wanted to point that one out there. Not that it's a huge thing, but yeah, maybe an extra day helps a little bit, especially going into a big rivalry game.
Do you like Friday games? I hate them.
I like Friday games on Sunday because that means I get to watch the NFL probably, as opposed to doing like my full rewatch on a Saturday, on a Sunday usually. The short week is tough. It's obviously tougher on the players and the coaches because they have a shorter amount of time to compare. But I'm more open to a Friday game if it's coming off like a bye week or something like that.
Yes, that's true.
Because the flip side of this is I just talked about getting an extra day of prep for USC. Like you're coming off of on November 8th playing at Iowa, and then 6 days later you're hosting Minnesota. Like I could see that being, I don't want to say like it's a huge trap game necessarily in Minnesota, but the game at Iowa could be one of your 2 or 3 most difficult games of the season. And following that up on short rest against the team in Minnesota that I think has been at least bowl eligible the last 3 or 4 seasons, that feels like, at least it's at home, but that feels like recipe for like, okay, that could get a little more interesting than you should expect. But in general, I'm probably more open to it if you get a bye leading in, just because 6 days of prep is not great.
Real quick, before we dive into some mailbag questions, let's do rapid fire predictions for the other 6. I'll start first with the Oregon State game to give you some time to think about this. I think this is going to be a Big Ten Network game, and I think it's probably going to be a night game, like a 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock window per se. I think the Big Ten Network will pounce on having a rivalry game that's out of conference on their network, which will also help fulfill the Big Ten Network and Oregon's requirement of being on there twice or 3 times a year.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, Matt, because you and Jared are a little more familiar with the TV rules. So is it 2? You have to have at least 2 Big Ten Network games, or 3? Because if it's 3, I absolutely think Oregon State's on Big Ten. If it's 2, maybe it's one of these other ones.
I'm going to double check. I think it's 3, but I'm going to look at their schedule from last year really quickly.
Because here, just while you look that up, here for listeners are the games that don't have TV or time designations. We have the Indiana game on the 11th. That's right after at Penn State. Then on the 25th of October, a couple weeks later, that Wisconsin game at home, no designation. Same thing, Iowa game on the 8th, and then the 2 final rivalry games, 22nd against USC and then 29th in Seattle against Washington. It's 2? Okay. I still think you're probably on the right path there with the Big Ten Network, because I'm going like the only other game that really makes sense to throw on the Big Ten Network maybe is that Indiana game on the 11th, but I also think there's enough kind of residual Hoosier interest out based off of what happened last year that they probably want to put that on a bigger network. Because like I don't think you're putting Wisconsin, Iowa, USC, or Washington on Big Ten Network. So it's like, do you put Oregon State or Indiana on there? And I think you probably go Bees game.
All right. Speaking of that, that's the next game that we have to pick. Indiana, October 11th. I'm going to go with this is going to be the NBC game that's going to be like the late night Peacock game, like Boise State was week 2 last season. 7 p.m. kick, 6 p.m.-ish kick on Peacock against Indiana. Kind of a hottish name, Indiana coming home to play Oregon. That's what I'm going to go with.
Yeah, some of this is I was just pulling up Indiana's schedule because I'm kind of going like, what do we think they're going to look like to that point in the season? Because they're hard to predict, right? Like no one saw what they did last year coming. Leading into Oregon, it's Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, Indiana State. Looks like they're still scheduling up. Hoosiers continuing to really make it difficult non-con. Illinois, and then at Iowa. So Illinois is supposed to be pretty darn good this year. Iowa, I think, as well. Like I could see them having 2 conference losses coming in. Does that disrupt things, or are they still of interest? I'm not sure. I'll angle this as maybe this is the Big Ten Network game, I guess, if they have to do 3, because I just think Oregon, Wisconsin, for whatever reason, feels like it's bigger than Indiana. Maybe just from a brand perspective,
sure.
And certainly from like their history playing each other. Like Oregon and Indiana, I don't think have played each other since, gosh, what was that? I think they had played a bowl game back in like the Bellotti era. It's been a long time.
Oregon, Indiana, that was the disastrous season opener.
Okay, that's right.
2004, I think, or 6, when it was like September 1st and 60 degrees and cloudy. It felt like a November day, and when it was supposed to be hot and warm, and it was ugly, and they lost.
That's right. I knew they lost, and I knew it was non-conference, obviously, and I thought it was Pilati, but I couldn't remember if it was regular season or bowl game. I think brand power wise, I'll cast my vote Big Ten Network there.
Okay. Now this one feels like if there's going to be a third Big Ten Network game, this feels like it. Rutgers 3:30, 4 o'clock.
Oh, I had overlooked that game. Yeah, that totally feels Big Ten Network. I feel silly. Go ahead.
I felt the same way. I kind of overlooked it. Like Oregon State. I go back to the Oregon State game and I'm like, well, who's going to pick it? NBC, Fox? Like, there's probably much bigger games at that point in the season still that it's going to not really warrant a Fox or an NBC or a CBS game. If it was ESPN had the Big Ten, right? Just say, oh, ESPN2 at 7 o'clock, like whatever. But this one feels definitively like a Big Ten game, unless
you're right.
Unless Rutgers has a surprise season and they're competent, but they shouldn't be competent. They're not a really strong program. But this feels like a Big Ten Network game as well.
Low-key a long trip that the Washington Huskies can tell you all about how difficult that is to make. So, like, it might be Big Ten Network, but it's also, like, kind of just a funky trip to make. And
yes,
it could be low-key a little bit more scary, even though I agree with you, Matt, that this is, like, of the teams that are playing, maybe, like, the 8th best team, 9th best team, something like that. Still probably could get weird. But, yeah, I almost feel like just casting my ballot there for Indiana, because I should have recognized, if Rutgers is a possibility, that should absolutely be Big Ten Network game.
25th of October, Wisconsin. This feels like 12:30, 3:30 CBS all the way.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the next one at Iowa, not to jump ahead, doesn't that feel kind of like maybe another big noon, depending upon what else is going on? Just because I think Iowa's going to be low-key kind of good. I'm not sure if people have been looking into their team, but they added South Dakota State quarterback. I think it's Mark Gronowski. He's like been the top quarterback at the FCS level the last couple of years, won consecutive national championships, kind of has done everything he needed at that level. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they're low-key pretty good this year. Defense is always a strength under Kirk Ferentz. Like, this could low-key be like 2 top 15-ish teams playing. And if that's the case, that feels like maybe a big noon. Yeah.
Easy. Yeah, I agree with you. Big noon on the 8th. And then the last one, November 22nd, is the home game for Oregon, last game of the year against USC. This feels like 12:30 CBS or 4:30 NBC. One of the two.
Yeah, this feels like a big. I mean, these last two being rivalry games, and again, depending upon where Oregon's at in their season, and kind of frankly, depending on, like, I don't think USC or Washington are going to be in the conference championship race. If I'm being honest, I also don't think these are like 6-win teams. These are teams that could win 8 or 9 games possibly. So, like, low key, these could be pretty significant. So, I think you're probably around the right track there with it being a CBS or an NBC. But, like, low key, could this be like maybe I should recalibrate my ballot and look at Iowa. Like, but if this is that much on the line, could this be a big noon too? I'm not sure. Like,
sure.
There's a couple of these that qualify at the end where it's like, I think Oregon's going to be in position to be competing for something significant. And if that's the case, I think there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on it. And like Iowa, USC, and Washington, 3 of the last 4 are all potentially really big games.
And then the last one, the Washington game, 29th. I think this is going to be a night game. I think it's going to be. We know Michigan, Ohio State will be the big noon kickoff game. So
Yep.
Probably depending upon record for Washington and Oregon, maybe they're the CBS game at 12 o'clock. Maybe they get the 4:30 NBC, but I'm thinking it's going to be NBC or Peacock again, late night, because it's 2 West Coast teams. You don't have to worry about half the fan base and it being 11 o'clock at kickoff or 10 o'clock at kickoff. This feels like a classic late game rivalry moment.
Yeah, I'll defer to you on network, but I think you're totally spot on. Like, this feels like it should be a night game, and you're right of like capturing that 7 o'clock, 7:30 window. I can't imagine there's another game on the West Coast that comes close to this in terms of its significance. someone can check me on that if there's like a really obvious, like, does USC play Notre Dame that day in LA? Maybe like, is that? Right. But like, I otherwise, like, I have to think this is like the most notable game. And so, yeah, whichever broadcast network gets this wants to put this kind of running on its own, in the evening there.
Sure. All right, let's dive into some mailbag questions. We had a couple that are going to tie into the schedule out, at least the first half of the schedule as well. Eric, you've got the questions. Let's dive into a couple here.
Yeah, we decided to bring the mailbag back because it had been, I was looking at, like, I think we've done one since the end of the 24 season. So it felt like, hey, it's almost June. Let's get some fan interaction. First one from @DuckFanDan, who's asked a lot of questions on the show. He asks, Oregon has a loaded team this year, but we've all seen that having an inexperienced quarterback can bring the whole team down halfway through the 2025 season. Do you think we'll feel like Dante Moore, and he puts in parentheses, the presumed starter, is an asset or a liability? Hashtag Autzen Audibles. I think, and again, so we're going halfway through the season. That's 6 weeks. So that's Montana State, Oklahoma State, Northwestern, Oregon State, Penn State, Indiana. Here's my guess. I think Oregon is 5-1 at this point in the season, with the one loss being the game at State College to Penn State. I'm going to guess that game is going to be extremely competitive. I don't think Oregon is going to get mopped there by any means. I think they're probably going to be. I'm always curious to see what like the team composite score looks like between programs that are going to be ranked up there. I think Oregon's going to have the more talented roster, at least based on that. I'm going to guess Dante's probably not going to be. That's like his first real big test of the season. Like we ran through it earlier, but like Montana State, Oklahoma State, Northwestern, Oregon State, like would you be surprised, Matt, like if like how many of those teams are going to have winning records at the end of the season? Like Montana State will do really well at the FCS level. The other three, like shoot, you could convince me those are all 5-6 win teams at best.
Yeah, I have a hard time. You look at the first group of teams that they're going to play, and Oklahoma State feels like a program that, from a name recognition standpoint, still carries a lot of respect. But go look at their results the last 3 or 4 years, and they're not.
Well, last year was a disaster.
Yeah, they're not what a typical Mike Gundy team has been like during his tenure the last 2 or 3 years. Oregon State feels like an ultimate disaster season coming again, where they could really struggle.
They upgraded quarterback at least, but yeah, I don't know how the rest of it looks.
Northwestern, like again, just a team that's always kind of fluctuating in that 4 to 8 wins. Their high is always like an 8-win season, and they're celebrating it. So sure. Yeah, like I look at the first half and say, I agree. Like a lot of these teams probably aren't going to have 10, 9-win seasons on their schedules. And maybe only Penn State is the only one that you look at and say, yeah, like if they have fewer than 9 wins, it's kind of be like, oh, what happened there?
Yeah. And so my point is, like, I think if we look at it from the scope of expectations, Oregon could very well be 5-1 at that point, and the one loss be at Penn State. And there's probably going to be a contingency of the fan base maybe that's going like, oh, Dante's at fault for not beating Penn State. I could see that scenario playing out, right? Like he could have played very, very well against the lesser teams. I'll throw Indiana in there, although I'm kind of, again, I don't really know where to group them. I think they're better probably than the other 4 teams that precede the Penn State game, but we'll see if that's true or not. They're hard to predict. But I could see them being 5-1, and it's like Dante's played 5 B games. Maybe one of those games is an AA plus game. He maybe really puts it together against Oregon State, kind of like how the offense came together last year in that rivalry game and took off. But then I could see that Penn State game, people being nitpicking it and going like, blah blah blah. So I'm gonna say he's gonna be an asset, but there's gonna be people in the fan base who are gonna say he's a liability because the expectation is like perfection at quarterback at Oregon right now. And this kind of leads into another question we'll get to in a second. I don't expect it's going to be perfection with Dante Moore or Austin Novosad or whoever ends up winning this job, just because it's going to be a young, inexperienced guy. And going into Penn State on the road is going to be difficult.
Yeah, I think it's going to be unfair that if we look at this and say, or even if they're 6-0, like let's just assume they go undefeated and they're all close games. Or I shouldn't say they're all close games. But like, let's say they squeak by Indiana, they squeak by against Penn State, and
it would be really impressive.
Yeah, and we're talking like a game-winning field goal kick or something. And Oklahoma State is a game at home in which it's 27-13, like that type of a game, low scoring, lean on your defense. Like if there's and if there's gripes that, hey, this offense isn't putting up 40 points a game and whatnot, like, and they're still 6-0, like I would sit here and be like, let's relax a little bit. Like fans have to realize two of the greatest statistical quarterbacks in the history of the sport have played the position the last 3 seasons, and
at the two most experienced, right? Like that matters.
That absolutely matters. And so it's going to look different. There's going to be bumps in the road. There's going to be learning curves. Now, if he comes out and looks like Dakota Prukop, no offense to Dakota, like, yeah, there's legitimacy to being concerned there. But that would be an ultimate shocker if that's the case.
Let me reframe it. Okay, so I think we both agree, and I think most listeners would agree. If they're 5-1 or 6-0, he's not been a liability, right? What if they're 4-2? And then let's assume they lose to Penn State and then pick one of the other 5. Like, I think at that point, because it feels like those other teams, like, again, I'll be curious what the composite for the team talent looks like this year. I just think from a recruiting ranking perspective, having just kind of gone through a lot of these rosters, like Oklahoma State, Northwestern, and Indiana and Oregon State, and obviously Montana State as an FCS team, just simply don't have the type of talent to beat Oregon based upon just, not on the field, but just like taking a step back, looking at the rankings. I think there would be a fairly reasonable argument, like if they're 4-2 and he doesn't play well in both losses, that he's been a liability, just because whoever that second loss is against is a team they should beat, and losing it will be maybe dependent upon poor quarterback play. So I guess that's how I'd frame it. Like if they're 4-2, I think you have reasons to be like, maybe he's been a liability. But if they're 5-1 or 6-0, like I think he's most likely been an asset. And some of this is contextualized by how the games play. But
sure,
just broadly speaking, that's how I feel. I think that's my answer.
Yeah, I think if they're 4-2 going into the back half of the year, and it's very evident that poor quarterback play was a major culprit in both of those losses, that probably opens the door where if a third loss happens during the back end of the season, in the first half, first 3 of those games, you probably open the door then for that, after that third loss, for the discussion internally of, as a coaching staff at Oregon, do we need to make a change at quarterback? Because we still have 3 or 4 games on the schedule. We can still kind of turn this ship around and get to 9 wins in the regular season before it really snowballs. Do you make that change? I think you've got a bye week in there as well, which would help provide that.
Bye week after Penn State,
which would allow some of that to happen. But if I also would argue, though, like, what if they're 4-2 and Dante Moore
is not the problem?
He's on fire, but maybe he makes 2 really costly mistakes, throws an interception in both games in the last drive of the game, but the offense puts up 40 points and the offense puts up 400 yards of total offense, where you're sitting here looking like the mistake stinks, but the whole scope of the body of work is really, really good. And the losses could easily be pegged on just as much as the defense not being up to par as the offense. There shouldn't be a discussion for a quarterback change. Now we're going way down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, I personally don't expect there to ever be a quarterback change discussion unless it gets really ugly. You brought up Prukop. That was the last time. I guess technically Tyler Shuck, Anthony Brown's season, that was just such a weird year. Like, it just doesn't happen very often, especially with a quarterback like Dante. But if it's really ugly, like, maybe they have the quarterbacks on this team to make a change. I just don't expect that.
Yep. All right. Next question.
Yeah, I think this leads right into it, and it's kind of a nice follow-up to this, because it sort of kind of us trying to set the expectations here for this position. Another quarterback question from Kelly Gamlin, who asked, Dante Moore's or Austin Novosad, I appreciate people including multiple quarterbacks, their 2025 overall quarterback season will rank where among the 4 landing seasons? It's really hard for me to suggest it's going to be anything but fourth. I don't know if that makes me a hater on Dante Moore and Autzen Novosad. I don't think so. I think I'm being realistic. And the reason I feel that way is like I just pulled up Oregon's single season best season list for quarterbacks, like their yardage and touchdowns. Like Bo Nix's 2023 season is the best single season passing season in school history. Dylan Gabriel's 2024 is third. Bo Nix's 2022 is sixth. So you're talking about three of the most productive passing seasons in school history. Bo Nix's 2023 broke the quarterback touchdown pass record. Dylan Gabriel last year, he's eighth with 30 touchdowns. Both are on 45 and 23. Still pretty mind-blowing if you think about it over a 14-game season. So like I say all that, and like these are the two most accurate quarterbacks ever in school history. I think the three most accurate passing seasons. So like I know it's a system in Will Stein and Kenny Dillingham the year before that is very favorable for quarterback play. A lot of easy passes incorporated. I think there's more complexity than maybe the offense gets credit for nationally in terms of these conversations about like, oh, these guys are check down merchants. They can't throw the ball deep. I think that's hogwash. But like, so it's a quarterback friendly system. So like, I don't think Dante or Autzen or whoever it is going to be bad. I also think like, I don't think that whoever wins this job is going to throw for more than 3,500 yards and more than 30 touchdowns, which is the baseline to reach these guys we just talked about in their seasons. So I'll say it's probably the worst season. It could still be the worst season and be like an all-conference second or third team Big Ten season too.
100%. The Novosad one, like I look at it and think he's just as much of a 10-win leading quarterback as Dante Moore. I think where the ceiling is that's kind of where I would look at Novosad and wonder, like, is this going to be a guy that gets Oregon to 12-0? And he could very well do it. If Dante Moore was not on this roster, I would feel still pretty confident based on what we've seen the last couple of years in limited snaps with Autzen Novosad's potential at the position. And I understand like the coaches publicly are always going to back their guys, and they're never going to come out and be like, well, that guy was terrible and we're really worried. Like if
unless he's the punter, apparently, Matt. Unless his name is Ross James, and then they replace him immediately.
That's true. But so like the coaches have always kind of backed anyone, but you get the genuine feel with Will Stein that he's got the ultimate confidence in Autzen Novosad too. So I'm with you that Dante or Autzen should be able to probably be, I hate to say like third or fourth, but again, go back and look at it and say like Bo Nix was really, really special in 2022 and then was unbelievably special in 23. And Gabriel led Oregon to an undefeated season in 2024. So, like, even if they're fourth among the four teams under Lanning, that doesn't mean that they're terrible. It just means that they're being compared to all-time greats.
Yeah, I mean, 2 of the 3 seasons ended with the guy in New York City for the Heisman Trophy. And it's interesting. I should know, like, this. I got this question on a radio show I did a couple weeks ago. Like, what do you make of Dante Moore being? I think he was at the time, and I'd have to go look and check now, but he was like 6th on the Heisman preseason list. And it's like, I just think that's the built-in expectation of quarterback at Oregon. So I understand this question, but I also think like, let's be rational and be like, it's probably unlikely that either Dante or Autzen, whoever wins this job, outproduces or outperforms what we've seen the last 3 seasons. But also your point, Matt, and the one I made earlier, I think is also true. Like it still could be 3,300 yards, 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. And I think everybody would be like, that's awesome. Let's bring on 2026 when this quarterback should be back to do even better. So anything else on the quarterback position, Matt?
Nope, we're good.
All right, let's jump over here to this last one from at Peanuts Playbook, who asked, what are the chances Jaden Kennedy and Theron Johnson end up starting? And then the last question here, any information on Sione Lalea's injury? He had a cast on recently. Don't have any update on Sione. Don't have updates on injuries really at all. Fortunately, that was something we lost kind of some access to. And then in terms of being at practice and then just in general, like there's not a whole lot of people who want to play ball in terms of talking injuries. In fact, like there was I don't think I'm oversharing to say there was a player who slipped up and talked about an injury after the spring game, and we were told, don't use those quotes. Yeah. So I think even if we had information, we probably wouldn't share it. But a lot of time, certainly from now, which is right at the end of May, until end of August, when the first game is played, 3 months of time for him to heal. So I would imagine he's okay, but I can't say I have any inside information there. To the questions on starters from these transfers here, I don't think these are similar situations, really. Theron Johnson, to me, is a much higher end player. I was actually surprised looking at the 24/7 Sports transfer rankings to see that they were kind of classified together as the 2 lowest rated transfer commitments, not excluding the punter. I think Johnson looks the part. He was an all Big Ten second team player last year. Like, are there higher end talents at the cornerback position on this team? Sure, but none of them have any experience. Like, I was just going through the cornerbacks kind of snap count from last season for a story breaking down the position. Like, 31 snaps returned from 2024 from corners on this roster, and they're all Seone Lauleas, because if he didn't play at all last year, Dakota didn't play at all last year, Jaleel Florence didn't play at all last year, and those are your 3 returners. So I think the experience gives Theron Johnson an edge. I think he will be a starter at least at day one, and maybe over the course of the season, like if Chris Hampton can stomach some kind of growing pains, maybe they play like a Neem Offord, or if he gets more run than expected, or Dakota Fields or somebody like that. Like, that's totally possible, but I still think Theron starts. I think Kennedy's chances of starting are obviously greatly impacted by what happens with Dalen Austin.
Yeah.
Like that's what that comes down to me, is like, if Dalen Austin's available, I think Dalen Austin's got the job and he's starting. If Dalen's not available, I think Jaden Kennedy's an awesome replacement level player at nickel, having played there the last couple of years of Ole Miss.
Yeah, I looked at Jaden Kennedy as a safety net if Dalen's not going to be available.
Same here. Yep, exactly.
And if Dalen is, then all that Oregon has done is they've added a guy that will push him to be better in the offseason, to get better. And if Dalen loses the job, that means Kennedy's played really, really well in fall camp. And your overall depth has been improved. The bar has been set, and it's now Austin's job to improve and keep getting better to be available for that spot. But I anticipate Dalen Austin being the guy. He played in all 14 games last year for Oregon. It's, if he's going to be available to play, this is going to be his opportunity to really kind of enhance and solidify a starting spot. Theron, that's the one where I'm with you. Like, a lot of this is going to be dependent upon the health of guys around him. And it feels almost, it's unfair to say it and label it this way, but it also feels similar, where like they brought in Theron in the event that if he isn't going to be all the way healthy, or Jaleel Florence isn't going to be all the way healthy, if Dakota Fields isn't going to be all the way healthy. And you also need some leadership back there, because like you said, there isn't a lot of snap counts with what Oregon has. And do you really want to roll with a handful of redshirt or true freshman guys, whether they're starters or your primary backups? They're going to have to play a lot. And so just giving yourself another player with experience will make everyone else around them better. But I do think if we had to pick one of the two, Theron's the one that will probably, at least the beginning of the year, we'll see a significant increase or higher snap count number than Kennedy.
And I could see an outcome where both these guys end up playing a lot. Like, veteran defensive backs historically under Dan, like, you just go through the exercise, like with the exception of Cam Alexander last year, I think like pretty much all the guys they brought in have been difference makers, most of which being starters. Like, basically the entire secondary last year were transfers they added in 2022, 23, or 24. I could see some of those guys, working their way to the top. But I also look around and go, I think it was notable that Oregon put so many resources prep recruiting at corner this last cycle, and the cycle before that. They've had, the last 2 cycles, I think 5 of their 10 best cornerback recruits in school history. Like, that just speaks to the value they place there. And then to only take one corner and it be a guy like Johnson, who I think is definitely a starting caliber player, but is not like a surefire NFL draft pick. Like this is a less high, I guess a less thought of or less at least hyped recruit than like Jabbar Muhammad. And like Jabbar ended up having a solid season last year, but that wasn't the guy who ended up, I don't think his NFL career is necessarily like set in stone. So I kind of see him in a similar light, maybe a little bit less talented overall than a Jabbar, but that's kind of how I see him. I think he's someone they bring in to start. And if the younger guys end up winning the job, it's like kudos to those guys. Cause like really like if Chris Hampton is comfortable with a couple of weeks of like young guys making some mistakes, maybe you just go ahead and you open the season with like Iffy on one side and Neem Offord on the other or something. So it's fascinating. It's the hardest position to predict. So it's kind of fun just to talk it through.
I'm with you. And I think if Hampton is okay with it, you got to play these younger guys because as cutthroat as that sounds, Darren Johnson's development won't be felt next year. It'll be felt for an NFL team. And if Iffy and Theron are very similar players right now, you roll with the younger guy because next year Iffy's here and Theron's on an NFL roster in some capacity. It makes you better. But I think what's probably going to ultimately happen, in my opinion, at the cornerback spot is they're going to go by committee for the first couple games. We might see a lot of rotation. We might see a lot of combinations out there, and maybe by the Oregon State game or by the Penn State game, then they'll start paring things down and more regular rotations and snap counts will be distributed out. There's just so many new faces and so many unknowns that if they can figure all that stuff out and 100% solidify who's getting 70% of the snaps as a starter and what, I'm making up an arbitrary number.
Sure. Yeah.
During fall camp, kudos to them. But just this feels like, though, so many new faces, so many question marks. We're going to see a lot of guys the first couple weeks.
Yeah, it may be a situation where you open like, hey, we're going to incorporate like a 4 or 5 man rotation early and then parse this down. And hopefully by Penn State, we're set. I think it's going to be one of the more fascinating position battles that we'll be talking about throughout fall and into the season, just because we've laid it out. We probably talked about it more than we need to, but it's very unpredictable. There's so many high-end talents. So few of them have had any success at this university. Basically, none of them did last year. And it's like, how does this all come together? It's hard to parse through, and it's going to be really fun. But I think we both agree, like Theron's a starting caliber player based on talent and his career. And I think Kennedy probably is too, but less likely to fill in right away.
All right, that's going to do it for us here on the Autzen Audibles Podcast. Thank you for listening to the show. Thank you for submitting your questions to the show as well. And until the next one, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles Podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.